The day began like any other. The sky was blue, and the sun hung lazily in the heavens, yet everything was about to change in a way that humanity could never have prepared for. It started slowly at first, the distant hum of engines, too loud to be mistaken for a regular aircraft, but nobody knew where it was coming from, or what it was. Soon after, a dark mass began to blot out the sun and grow larger as it approached. As a shadow swept across the cities below, people began to look up and wonder what it was. It didn't belong to anything they knew or had ever seen. Then, without warning, massive alien ships appeared in the sky. Their sheer size beyond comprehension, they dwarfed the tallest buildings, and their sharp outlines seemed like something from a nightmare. Their dark metallic surfaces gleamed under the sunlight, and their presence was ominous, like an unstoppable force just waiting to crush the world beneath them. At first, there was silence, broken only by the whispers of people too afraid to speak loudly. As they gazed upward, governments worldwide scrambled to respond, yet no one had an answer. The ships didn't communicate at first. They simply hovered in place, their vast array of sensors scanning the earth below, each movement calculated and precise. Within hours, the first message arrived, not in the form of words, but in waves of sound, strange tones and pulses that felt alien in every sense. It was then that the humans learned who their visitors were. The Vrix, a race of technologically advanced conquerors who had swept across the stars, laying claim to countless planets with brutality and precision. Their message to the world was simple and terrifying: "We have arrived. Surrender immediately, or we will destroy your world. You have 24 hours to comply." The moment the message hit the airwaves, fear spread like wildfire across the globe. People turned to their leaders, expecting some form of guidance, some plan of action, but all they saw were uncertain faces. Whispers of panic filled the air. No one knew how to respond. What could they do against ships that could block out the sun, against weapons far beyond anything Earth had seen? The United Nations called an emergency meeting. World leaders rushed to speak to one another. Some argued for peaceful negotiation, others advocated for military action, but none had any true answers. The situation was spiraling beyond their control. The Vrix did not wait for them to come to a decision. They were confident the Earth's resistance would be short-lived, and so they waited, their massive ships hovering silently over the planet, ready to rain destruction down at a moment's notice. As panic set in across the globe, the people of Earth faced an uncertain future. Would they fight back, or would they fall before the might of the Vrix? Only one thing was clear: the world was about to change forever. But in the midst of the growing uncertainty, a voice broke through the chaos. The broadcast was not official, nor was it expected. It came from a simple civilian who had never held any power or title, but her words rang out with the force of a declaration. She spoke to the world as the skies darkened above her, and her voice echoed across every screen. "We will not ask for permission to survive. Humanity will not kneel before invaders. Our fight has just begun." The message spread across the globe like wildfire. From the moment it was broadcast, people all over the world felt a spark of something they hadn't known in weeks. Fear began to shift into something else, something far more dangerous. To the Vrix, defiance, with the entire world watching. Sarah Lancaster, the woman who had spoken those bold words, became an accidental symbol of resistance. She was not a politician or a soldier, but an engineer from New York City, and yet in a few short moments, she became the face of humanity's refusal to be intimidated. As her words echoed across every screen, people began to rally together in a way that was previously unthinkable. Despite the Vrix's overwhelming power, something about Sarah's voice stirred a deep sense of unity within the people of Earth, and soon the streets were filled with people chanting, demanding action, calling on their governments to take a stand against the alien invaders. The Vrix might have had superior technology, but they had never encountered a force like this. Humans were stubborn and determined. People from all corners of the Earth reached out to each other online, in secret forums, and encrypted messages. They began organizing resistance efforts to sabotage Vrix operations and gather whatever resources they could. It was not much, but it was a start. In every city, people began organizing underground movements. Some were small, others massive, but each one had a singular goal: to fight back against the invaders who had dared to threaten their home. There was no clear chain of command or single leader, but what they lacked in organization they made up for in unity. Their shared purpose became their strength. Small victories began to trickle in as human ingenuity began to shine, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Improvised weapons were being built in homes, garages, and basements. People hacked into alien communications and scrambled their signals. They sabotaged Vrix drones and set traps that slowed their movements in key areas. The Vrix had underestimated humanity's resilience. They had assumed Earth would collapse in fear that the sight of their ships would break the spirit of the human race. Instead, they were met with a surprising resistance, one that was unpredictable and resourceful. At the same time, the resistance spread not just in cities, but in rural areas too. Farmers, engineers, teachers, and students all began to play their part. They set up underground bases and safe houses where they could store supplies and plan attacks in secret. These were not trained warriors, but people who understood their land and had a deep connection to it. They fought with the determination of people who had no intention of losing their homes. One night, as the Vrix began their first wave of attacks on major cities across the globe, something unexpected happened. Several countries that had been silent in the face of the invasion suddenly opened their borders to support the resistance. They shared information and resources with those who had the will to fight regardless of their own government's previous hesitation. The Vrix looked on in confusion as humanity seemed to grow stronger with every day they were on Earth. The resistance wasn't waiting for permission. They were already acting, taking the fight to the invaders without hesitation. And the Vrix had no idea just how deep the well of human resolve ran. The resistance grew bolder with every passing day, and though their resources were limited, they had a determination that the Vrix could not fathom. Each small victory sent shockwaves through the invading forces. Despite their advanced weaponry, the Vrix were caught off guard by the sheer unpredictability of humanity. They had anticipated a swift surrender, but instead they found themselves tangled in a guerrilla war that no amount of firepower could quench. It was in the midst of this resistance that the first real counterattack was born. The idea came from an unexpected source. A small group of civilians who had once been engineers and technicians gathered in secret to discuss their most recent discovery. While the Vrix were focused on major cities, the humans had been investigating the alien technology left behind after the initial strikes. A single piece of alien equipment, a damaged communication relay, had been found buried beneath the ruins of a collapsed building. It was nothing more than a piece of scrap to the Vrix, but to the humans it held the key to a possible breakthrough. As the resistance worked to decipher the alien technology, they realized that they had stumbled upon a weakness, something that could turn the tide in their favor. The Vrix communication systems relied on a complex network of relay stations scattered around the world, and if they could disrupt these relays, it could cause a global blackout, forcing the Vrix to lose their grip on Earth for just enough time to launch an all-out assault. But time was against them. The Vrix had already begun retaliating with brutal airstrikes, targeting resistance hotspots in an attempt to cripple humanity's efforts. The situation was growing dire as the death toll climbed, and many began to lose hope. But Sarah Lancaster refused to let them fall into despair. She knew that this was their chance, that this was the moment to make their mark and reclaim their future. Without hesitation, she gathered a small team of trusted allies, including former soldiers and scientists, each one with a specific skill set essential for the mission. They called it the Blackout Strike. Their plan was simple yet incredibly dangerous. They would infiltrate one of the Vrix's central relay stations and destroy it from within using the technology they had just uncovered. The operation would take them deep behind enemy lines into one of the most heavily guarded sites in the world. It would be a suicide mission for most, but for the team it was an opportunity to strike a decisive blow against the invaders. As the team prepared for their mission, the air was thick with tension. They knew that once they entered the Vrix stronghold there would be no turning back, but the stakes were higher than ever. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting to send a message to the Vrix, and to the rest of the world. The message was simple: we will never ask for permission, and we will fight until the last breath, no matter the cost. And so, with nothing but resolve and the hope of victory in their hearts, they set off on a mission that would change the course of the war forever. The team moved under the cover of darkness. Their hearts raced, But their faces were set with grim determination. They knew the odds were against them, but there was no turning back. The mission had to succeed. Failure was not an option. As they approached the Vrix relay station, the ground beneath them seemed to tremble with the weight of the alien technology. Surrounding them, the structure itself was a towering behemoth, its walls made of a strange metal that hummed with a low, eerie vibration. Every step they took was calculated, every movement synchronized. As they moved silently through the shadows, they were a small group in a vast world of enemies, but their resolve was unshakable. The station was surrounded by layers of defenses. Automated drones and armed patrols scoured the perimeter. It was a fortress designed to protect one of the most vital pieces of the Vrix infrastructure. It would be a miracle if they could make it inside unnoticed, but they had no choice. The team reached the outer wall and set up camp just outside the range of the enemy surveillance systems. They began their work using the alien technology they had recovered. They hacked into the station's outer security systems, overriding its sensors and disabling the patrol drones one by one. The process was slow and tense. The slightest mistake could trigger an alarm and end the mission, but their combined expertise kept them focused. They worked in silence, each member of the team doing their part with surgical precision. Finally, after hours of careful planning and execution, the outer defenses were breached. The team moved inside the station's walls, entering through a hidden maintenance hatch. They were now deep within enemy territory, but the danger was far from over. Every hallway they passed was guarded by alien sentries. Each step took them further into the heart of the Vrix stronghold. Their mission was clear, but the stakes had never been higher. They had to reach the main communications hub and plant the devices that would overload the relay's core. But they were not alone. The Vrix had already begun to realize that something was wrong. Their heightened alert status sent a chill through the air. The team was not the only one inside the facility. Soon they could hear the unmistakable sound of alien footfalls echoing through the corridors. The hunt had begun. They moved quickly, but carefully. Every corner they turned brought them closer to their goal, and closer to discovery. One wrong move could mean the end of everything, but they pressed on, knowing that the success of the mission rested entirely on their shoulders. The deeper they went, the more the station seemed alive. Strange noises reverberated through the halls, as though the very walls were watching them. They reached the central hub, but they weren't alone. Standing in front of the communications core was a group of Vrix soldiers, their eyes glowing with an unnatural intensity. They had been waiting for them. The standoff was inevitable. As the two sides stared each other down, the humans knew that this was the moment where everything would be decided. The fate of their world hung in the balance, and the only thing that mattered now was whether they would fight hard enough to claim it. The tension in the room was palpable. The Vrix soldiers stood rigid, their alien eyes glowing with cold intelligence, their weapons aimed directly at the humans, their movements precise and calculated. The humans knew they had only one chance, and it would be a fight to the death. They couldn't afford to hesitate. Sarah was the first to act. Without warning, she lunged forward, using the element of surprise to her advantage. The Vrix soldiers reacted instantly, but their speed was no match for the ferocity of human determination. The humans were outnumbered, but they fought with everything they had. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message that the Vrix would never forget. In the chaos of the confrontation, Sarah's team scattered, splitting up to create confusion among the Vrix. The humans used their knowledge of the station's layout to their advantage. They dodged. The explosion rocked the station, sending a shockwave through the halls. The lights flickered and alarms blared. As the system began to overload, the Vrix were momentarily disoriented by the unexpected turn of events, but they quickly regained their composure. The humans had only moments before the full force of the alien retaliation would come crashing down on them. Sarah and David ran through the corridors, their breath coming in ragged gasps. The sounds of Vrix soldiers chasing them grew louder with every step, but they pushed on. Their mission was complete, but they hadn't made it out yet. As they rounded a corner, they found themselves face to face with a squad of Vrix soldiers. Their weapons raised. The humans had no choice. They fought back with everything they had. Sarah grabbed a nearby pipe and swung it with all her strength, knocking one soldier off balance. David pulled a fire extinguisher from a wall and sprayed it at another soldier, temporarily blinding him. The team was running on pure adrenaline. Each move was a desperate attempt to stay alive, and reached the exit. But the Vrix were relentless. They kept coming. Wave after wave of alien soldiers appeared from every direction, their weapons firing on instinct. The humans fought through sheer willpower. But it wasn't enough. The odds were too great. Then, just when it seemed that the resistance would be overwhelmed, a loud crash shook the walls of the station. The Vrix paused for a split second, confused by the sudden sound of destruction, before they realized too late that it wasn't just the humans who had come to fight. Reinforcements had arrived. The resistance had made their move across the globe. As soon as the relay station's communication blackout had taken effect, small teams of resistance fighters had infiltrated other key Vrix facilities, all coordinated by a single plan to disrupt the invaders on every front. The sudden attack caught the Vrix off guard. They had been expecting to crush humanity in a swift blow, but instead they found themselves fighting on multiple fronts, unable to focus on one target for long. The Vrix soldiers hesitated, and in that brief moment of confusion, Sarah's team pushed forward. They fought their way toward the exit, the sound of weapons fire echoing in every direction. The team was exhausted, but they could see the light of freedom just ahead. The outside world was in sight. They made it through the door just as another explosion rocked the station. The blast from the station's core detonation sent debris flying, and the team was thrown off their feet. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down, and in the haze of dust and smoke, Sarah and her team struggled to regain their bearings. But they didn't stop. They didn't give up. They were alive, and the mission had been a success. The Vrix had been dealt a blow they hadn't anticipated, and the human resistance was now stronger than ever. The station's destruction sent ripples across the entire alien network. Their communications were severed, their control was fractured, and humanity's fight was just beginning. Sarah and her team didn't look back. As they sprinted to their extraction point, they had set the stage for something bigger, something more powerful than the Vrix could have ever imagined. Humanity had refused to ask for permission, and now they were making their stand across the world, one battle at a time. The war was far from over, but they had just shown the Vrix that Earth was not a prize to be taken without a fight. The days following the blackout strike were a blur of chaos and determination. The destruction of the Vrix relay station had sent shockwaves through their command structure and left them scrambling to reestablish control over their global operations. But the humans had seized the opportunity, and the resistance was now growing faster than anyone could have imagined. Every corner of the world was alive with uprisings as humanity continued to fight back against their invaders. Small cells of resistance forces coordinated attacks and sabotage missions, while the world's military forces began to unite under a common banner. No longer divided by political boundaries, they had one enemy now, and they knew they had to work together. The Vrix responded quickly, sending waves of reinforcements to every major city, attempting to quash the growing rebellion. But the more they fought back, the more they revealed their weaknesses. It was clear now that they had underestimated humanity. They had thought their advanced technology and overwhelming numbers would make them unstoppable. But the humans were not just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their future. They were fighting for the right to live on their own terms, with their own rules. The Vrix may have had the firepower, but the humans had the spirit and the will to never back down. As the weeks passed, the tide began to shift. The Vrix started to lose ground in several key locations. Their supply lines were disrupted, their bases sabotaged, and their command structure fractured under the weight of humanity's relentless assault. At the same time, the resistance began to gain access to more of the Vrix's technology. Engineers, scientists, and tech experts from every corner of the Earth worked together to reverse engineer alien weapons and craft their own countermeasures. It wasn't just about fighting back anymore. It was about turning the tide and fighting smarter. Humanity had begun to understand the alien technology on a deeper level, and with that knowledge they crafted weapons and defenses capable of matching the Vrix head-on. As the resistance gained momentum, they became more than just a group of insurgents. They became a movement, a revolution that spanned the globe. Their message resonated with every person who had ever felt powerless against an oppressive force. Humanity was no longer asking for permission. They were demanding their right to fight back, and they were doing it on their own terms. The Vrix had hoped that humanity would bend under their power, But instead, they had ignited a spark of rebellion that could not be extinguished. Every day more people joined the cause, from the depths of the oceans to the tallest mountains, from the frozen tundra to the sun-scorched deserts. The resistance spread like wildfire. The Vrix may have had the technology, but humanity had the heart, and that was something they could never replicate. Despite their technological superiority, the Vrix could not understand what made humans so dangerous. It wasn't just their ability to adapt or their ingenuity, it was their refusal to accept defeat, their ability to rise time and time again, no matter how many times they were knocked down. And as humanity's resistance continued to grow stronger, the Vrix began to feel something they had never felt before: fear of an enemy that refused to bow down, fear of an enemy that would never ask for permission to survive. The final days of the war arrived with a sense of urgency and tension that gripped the entire planet. The Vrix had thrown everything they had into the fight, desperate to quash humanity's resistance. But the resistance had become something greater than anyone could have predicted. It was no longer just a war, it was a full-scale revolution. Humanity had found its voice and refused to be silenced. No matter how many times the Vrix tried to crush them, they kept coming back stronger than before. The battle for Earth reached its climax when the resistance launched a full-scale assault on the Vrix's main command ship, the massive warship that had hovered over the planet like a dark cloud for weeks. Now the ship was the heart of the Vrix invasion. It controlled all of their forces, their communications, and their ability to coordinate strikes across the globe. The humans knew that if they could take it down, the Vrix would have no choice but to retreat, but getting there would be no easy feat. The ship was well guarded and heavily fortified, but humanity had one advantage: the Vrix had underestimated them. They had underestimated the strength of the human spirit. And now it was time to show them what that spirit could do. The assault was launched in the dead of night, with resistance fighters from every corner of the Earth coming together in a coordinated attack. Ships, fighters, and ground troops moved in perfect synchronization as they descended upon the Vrix command ship. The battle was fierce. The Vrix threw everything they had at the humans, from automated drones to heavy artillery, but the resistance was relentless. They used everything they had learned from their previous victories to adapt and outmaneuver the Vrix at every turn. The humans knew they were fighting for more than just their survival. They were fighting for the future of their planet, and every person on it. The battle raged for hours, with no sign of retreat. The Vrix were caught off guard by the strength of humanity's assault. Their command ship was under constant attack from all sides. The humans had found their way inside the ship and were planting explosives at critical points throughout the vessel. Sarah and her team led the charge as they fought their way through the corridors of the ship, their weapons raised and their determination unshakable. They knew that this was it, the final showdown. The Vrix had no idea what they were up against. The human resistance wasn't just fighting to survive. They were fighting to win. With every explosion and every strike, humanity made its final stand as the Vrix command ship began to tremble and collapse under the weight of the human assault. The invaders realized too late that they had underestimated the power of the human will. The ship exploded in a massive burst of energy that lit up the sky as the Vrix forces crumbled and their control over the planet shattered. Humanity stood victorious. They had won. But they knew this was only the beginning. The war had ended, but the fight for their future would continue. They had proven that no matter how powerful the enemy, no matter how insurmountable the odds, humanity would never ask for permission to survive. They would never kneel before anyone, and they would always rise again. No matter what, the Vrix had learned the hard way that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and they would never forget the lesson. Earth was free, and humanity had earned the right to live on their own terms.